Hello, welcome back to my YouTube storytelling channel. Happy New Year to each and every single one of you. May this new year bring you abundance of wealth, joy, and happiness. I am here to read part 5 of Plig. Parts 1 through 4 can be found in my videos below. I hope that you have been enjoying the story. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Lưu nú tờ tuột sổ nú, nhẹ của cho kém bùa con. Cú mi nè hóa tài đô của xia, có bỏ bỏ của khí lúc nú mỏ thừa. Đô nôn đi là luôn nú là chịu tàu con. Đô có nhón đại, mụ có lùa. Cú sai cá đô lưu xia khí tìa, và giờ cú họ chịu tàu lên lưu nú. Hussein said as he ran his hand down the arm of his sleeping wife. Her long lashes caressed her cheeks, her long dark strands laid behind her like a fan. And her body, naked as the day she was born, beside him in his arms. It had been so long since he'd gotten to be this way with her. As he looked out the window, the sun was beginning to rise from the horizon. The duties of a king was going to be knocking on his door, and he would have to let her go. He didn't want to part from her. Last night's lovemaking raced in his mind, and he thought he'd lost the chance to make her shiver beneath him. But he was wrong. The woman had fought with everything she had until the end when her body betrayed her and she gave in to him. He remembered how her eyes had shed tears and her lips pleaded with a voice of sheer pleasure holding his name. He leaned down and kissed her shoulder, wrapping his arm around her. Jillian, cô bao cô quan tàu ya ô tô có tù xia. Kê rạt xin chơi yun tên cô mà lên nọ lòng tới có luôn châu lò. Nằm mò có tuần xia lần đó của tù. Cho kê lưu, cũng chẳng thể vô là kẹo tàu ư. Dân đến bảo tư, có lưu xia, có lưu kê, chẳng bảo của tí tù. Hầu có lưu xin tia, cũng kia xia ya có chỉ bảo cho. Cho ya có ua, cũng nhưng chỉ bảo cho có tư. Thầu có hai lưu luôn xì đâu lùa. Cũng xa có ya cũng luôn chay ổ nó có cho lưu rong. Cũng tàu có thầu có lùa, cũng chẳng xa tàu có thầu có lau. Vì có ý lăng thế lý của tù. He bent down and placed a soft kiss on her forehead. She stirred, and her eyes opened. She braced her hands against his chest, and he reached up to remove them, holding both of her hands in his. "Tsa kia kudo," he whispered. Tears filled her eyes, and she turned away. A tear dropped on her cheek, and he reached over to wipe it away. "Si hoa tai, nhà lô nâng lý có thế cô. Lô yên nhớ là chẳng là nha. Có nhớ cho lý giả được cô cũng xa tại cái xưa đâu có ý rong gì." He tilted her chin, and she turned to look up at him. He smiled, and his thumb grazed across her lower lip. And then he kissed her deeply and pulled her into his arms. "Yo, cô bảo rằng cô sao lựa gì hoa tai. Muốn đâu ya cô yo la chỉ thâu. Để she tin hu namo. Cô đó tao có là nhỏ cô lưu sinh tia. Đó bỏ có lúc họ mua sai cũng đọc kể lưu. Cô cho lưu hai tia. Cô yêu ớt xuôi ya còn hình nút bỏ cái rong này nọ. Cô xin trái lưng tư lại. She sniffed and cleared her throat. Yali, xin hu namo. Tia cô đó là bỏ có đôi sao thao lao. Gojong stood in her chamber, looking at the torn fabrics on the bed, with overturned chairs and food smashed across the wall. Anger filled her heart as she removed each hairpin from her bun and her dark hair tumbled down. Last night, she had walked past Hussein's chamber and listened. She heard every promise, every word, and every sound that he had given to Jillian. In the end, although she loved him deeply, she was still just a concubine. She had no right to anything, and the people had always looked at her as a fool. Her womb had dried up long ago, and even though the oracle had predicted she would birth a son, she never did. Now that the queen had won and got the king back into her bed, it meant she would be alone, and her time was ticking. If she didn't do something soon, she'd be a commoner in the villages, and would have to work to earn her keep. The thought of getting her hands dirty made her teeth clenched and her chest constrict. She pulled the pearls around her neck, causing them to collide with the floor in a mess and spiral to corners of the room. In the middle of her angry heist, the door to her chamber opened, and Jillian walked in wearing a gold dress with white trims around and a very beautiful red necklace. She looked the part of a queen, while Nkauj looked like a jealous lover. But wait, she was. Jillian said. Nkauj squared her shoulders. Rong cái xía cơ bùi à? Rong nó có tàu kia li có cho kín chờ. Bùi rong cái xía. Nếu nó có là bỏ của rong li nó nà. Smiling, Jillian replied, Tu đã chỉ ở nhà thông tu lọ, nữ yên chơi đó là chế đó nữ lưu rể. Nữ yên chỉ là một tá chúa tá gì đâu từ khoa sanh đâu. Có nhân rong li đó, giờ có xã tàu luôn nên đó chỉ hóa tài. Có luôn chỉ một tốt cơ ạ. Jillian walked into the room, kicking aside the fabrics that lay scattered on the floor. Con dân trọng ít khó trần kiến đã có thể là cú nà mà. Cú, giờ nè hóa tài. Lưu mênh mỏ giờ cú trì, lưu huy kỳ giờ cú tù. Chỉ hóa tài sáng bá giờ cho cú lưu mì ta hậu sơ á. Giờ có giờ là chân lần dìa là chúa tao lưu kế thế là lưu đằng xia còn lưu chân tài sơ. Bây sành hóa hử, cú giờ tuần ra cả tên trò lưu. Cú sát tài thế lý mô lưu bệnh sử là khó khẽ tây nên rơi rõ. Có giờ ý tu sỉnh ô là tớ tổ chỉ hóa tài thầu giá mòn tu. Thảo cho lên cho tu bươn chết tỏ. Chỉ mua ý rơ và chỉ hóa tài vô là sở sổ có lúc mình khạc bươn á mọ. Lưu giờ là cũng cả ta, là nếu như tí đó là sai lưu nút tua sổ của lưu xa. Nkauj eyes filled with tears and she screamed. Picking up a shoe on the ground, she tossed it toward Jillian, right as Hussein walked in, and jumped in front of Jillian to take the brutal blow of the heel. Nkauj gasp was loud as Hussein glared at her. He turned to look at Jillian, tilting her chin to make sure she hadn't been injured, and then she turned around to look at Nkauj with hate in his eyes. Giờ tiền nữ tư của trường bò của tụi mình nhà hóa tài đại tướng cái đông lon được có sát tay thia. Nữ đợi có cho kế qua cử giờ thông tù nó mò. Con giờ chúng có cả chờ họ lúc vào lúc chạy nó. Sẽ giờ để có sự mò đã chịu oan kể của mình chỉ hư lửa đâu cả. Của sai rong lì. Có tế tờ đỡ mỏ ra là bây giờ. Nkauj let out a sob. Có theo chính cha là nè. Lương tư bỏ tiền của thế lý do tụi bên này do là chó kỳ đâu cả luôn nè. Ôi chả có lúc không mua đồ tư lợi. Hussein frowned, and then he laughed. Chó kỳ đâu cả luôn nè. Cú sai trong này có tới sáng sự tối thứ tú là hầu lúc vào lúc chơi nó được cú sa. Giờ có mua tối thứ tú được cú là mà có thể mua chai hai ly có bỏ. Lương tu lúc không hồn đi, thế là dọc kê. Cú thế là dọc kê là cùng tao có. Có nhỏ là cú yên xin tía, có mù là cú yên chỉ kinh. Điều sĩ của tôi này hóa tài, có sát tệ chuyện cứu cho. The castle walls were filled with a merry laughter as King Su came down the stairs to find that his bride-to-be was sitting with his servants, helping peel potatoes. This was a scene he'd never thought he'd wake up to find in his home. He stopped in his tracks, adjusting the blue tunic as he took the sight before him. Her hair was long and slightly curly today, and she wore a dark green dress that brought out her eyes. He had to be careful and remind himself that his mission in life was to take revenge, not to fall in love. His servants saw him and paused from their work. She noticed their actions and turned around to see what had caused the interruption. When their eyes met, she lowered the peeler, and one of the servants came by to take it from her hand. They took the bowls and walked out of the room one by one. Shen Zali Nasu, Kutumin go nyata to a chila. Yakuyatsa sai kutumin go sakai ololi. King Su said as he came to her. She adjusted her dress, and he came to walk around her in circles, admiring how her eyes seemed to glow when he was near. Nuna, Jela? He asked. She shifted her head to him. Kasayo Gela. Gutua Vika Jensai Zita Wakanyato, Gutua Pale Holumji, Galuto Shaw. Laughing, he crossed his arms and asked, Tao Tui Kazashi Pao Zataya no Hokuluche. Bayaka Mama Lokunguna. Salva Kia, she sneered. Gutoka Tagusa Holu Gunekuziga Kuwase. Gutika Yatu Yin Yon Lot Chapler. Nú tư của là cái tụi mình để chế mà có bà bảo hay tiệc của trong lý cả thế tia thầu nó có qua là cũng mới chịu lọ. Nodding, he uncrossed his arms and shrugged. Giờ lý kể có bảo của chờ cú và tiền nú tư ước là shit tàu nhau ở kể tây lũ có hai có trong hai có xuyên cây xứ có những watch tối khó giờ có chuyện của tao thế mà cú chỉ ở kinh xuống có tư của lo. He nodded. Tư tia vì có bí kể của tao sao. Mai Sia laughed as she walked to him and extended her hand to shake on the bed. He gestured to walk her out, and as he walked out with her to where her horse was brought from the servants, he couldn't help but smile, because her scent was overpowering him, and he was having so much fun toying with her. As she turned around to bid goodbye, he heard the sound of the arrow hissing through the air, and was a hair slow to catch it as it pierced through Mai Sia's right shoulder. He saw her fall, and anger shot through him as he caught her body. Ba Ning! One of his men-at-arms cried. The guards all rushed out as Su picked her up and carried her back inside, where the doors closed. She was unconscious and bleeding profusely. He carried her up the stairs and shouted for orders to bring warm water and to fetch the doctor. Su brought her into his chamber and laid her down where he ripped open the upper part of her dress. The arrow had missed a vital vein, but it had injured enough where she wouldn't be able to use her strength for a few weeks. Servants poured in with tools, warm water, and bandages. He cut the arrow shorter as she began to stir and awaken. Yeah, Olika, she asked weakly. Sunshine. He knew it would hurt her if he pulled the arrow, but it had to be done. She was fully awake now and aware of what was going on. As he said this, he placed his fingers around the arrow, and she began breathing deeply. He waited until she had controlled her breathing, and he pulled. She screamed, and he bent down and kissed her. The scream was muffled as she reached up and grabbed a hold of his shoulder, squeezing, her fingers digging into his flesh. When he finally removed the arrow, he pulled free from her lips and saw tears streaming down her face. He dropped the arrow into the pail beside him and took the wet towel to gently wipe away the blood. Su, she whispered. She let out a small groan of pain and then lost conscious again. He cursed and saw her wound bleeding more than he expected. He heard steps coming up the stairs, and the doctor entered. Su said. He walked out as the doctor took over, and he saw his bloody hands. He walked down the stairs and grabbed a bow and arrow. Nobody shoots at his bride-to-be and lives. Today, somebody was going to die. Thank you for tuning in to part 5 of Zai Plig. Part 6 will be uploaded shortly.